I always believed that my home was a sanctuary, a private retreat, where I could decompress after the chaotic demands of my career in the city. After a long day of navigating complex projects at my firm, there was nothing I looked forward to more than walking through my front door, hearing the lock click, and sinking into the quiet comfort of the life Michael and I had built together. I thought our space was sacred, a home built on mutual respect and boundaries. But that evening, as I stepped into our Manhattan apartment, the familiar warmth was gone. In its place was the suffocating reality of a nightmare I never saw coming. I had been juggling a high-stakes project for the International Design Association, my mind cluttered with floor plans and structural aesthetics. My hands were full with my laptop bag and a heavy file folder, and all I wanted was a glass of wine and silence. But as the door swung open, the silence was shattered. My living room had been transformed into a noisy, chaotic mess. Mrs. Sterling and Mr. Sterling were sprawled across my white velvet sofa when I had painstakingly picked out to match the apartment's minimalist aesthetic. Jason, my husband's younger brother, was there with his wife, Sarah, and their twin boys, who looked to be about 5 years old. They were laughing, shouting, and tossing snack wrappers and plastic toys across the floor. Michael strolled out from the kitchen, a beer in his hand, looking entirely too relaxed. When he saw me, he offered a grin that felt completely hollow. "Hey, you're home," Michael said, oblivious to the absolute havoc surrounding him. "Surprise! My parents and Jason's family came into town today. I wanted to surprise you, so I didn't mention it earlier." A surprise. I stared at him, my heart pounding against my ribs like a trapped bird. This wasn't a surprise. It was an invasion. It was a complete and utter lack of respect. My home, my sanctuary, had been colonized by 8 people without a single word of discussion or consent. In that moment, I realized that the things we often dismiss as minor are exactly the things that erode self-respect and love, piece by agonizing piece. The living room was a disaster. Mrs. Sterling was aggressively clicking through channels on my TV with the remote, clearly not interested in anything but noise. Jason and Sarah had completely monopolized the armchairs, and their twin boys were crawling all over my expensive, cream-colored sheepskin rug, the one I'd bought just last week, treating it like a public park. The coffee table, which usually held nothing but a curated design magazine and a minimalist candle, was covered in sunflower seed shells and half-eaten fruit. My heart sank even further when I saw my favorite hardbound interior design book lying face down on the hardwood floor, its corner crushed and mangled. "So, the breadwinner is finally home?" Mrs. Sterling didn't even bother to look up from the TV. "We're starving. Go into the kitchen and get dinner started." I stood there, paralyzed, my fingernails digging into my palms until it hurt. I scanned the room for Michael, hoping for a shred of support, at the very least, a look of apology. Instead, I saw him take a sip of his beer, his expression entirely unbothered. "You're home, babe," he said, as if it were the most normal thing in the world. "The family is here, we're hungry. You know how Mom gets when she's had a long day of traveling." The audacity. It felt as though a weight were pressing down on my chest, making it impossible to breathe. It wasn't just about dinner. It was about the fact that they viewed me as the hired help-a-live-in housekeeper who happened to pay the mortgage. "Victoria, are you just going to stand there?" Mrs. Sterling barked, finally turning her icy gaze toward me. "It's getting late, and the kids are famished." I took a long, steadying breath, suppressing the fury that was threatening to boil over. Years of working in high-end design had taught me how to handle even the most unreasonable clients with a forced, professional smile. I decided in that moment to treat my in-laws like the most difficult, entitled clients of my career. "Of course," I replied, my voice chillingly calm. "I'll get right on it." I dropped my bag and headed toward the kitchen, my posture rigid. But just as I passed the chaos of the living room, Jason's oldest son lunged forward, grabbing my leg with a sticky, frantic grip. "Aunt Victoria, I want sweet and sour pork," he squealed, his hands coated in some unrecognizable, viscous grime that he proceeded to wipe directly onto my professional slacks. I looked down at the boy, then back at the room full of people who had no intention of ever leaving, and felt a cold, sharp resolve settle deep within me. This wasn't going to be a simple dinner. It was going to be the start of a war. I gently pried his sticky hands off my legs without saying a word. The kitchen looked like a disaster zone. The sink was piled high with crusty, unwashed dishes. The countertops were a mess of vegetable scraps and spilled leftovers. And the floor was splattered with dark, tacky soy sauce stains. I opened the refrigerator and my heart sank. It was packed with unfamiliar, fatty meats and processed junk. All the organic produce and the specialty yogurt I carefully stocked were completely gone. My fingers trembled as I unbuckled my apron to start cleaning. The kitchen utensils were scattered everywhere, and when I reached for my high-end German chef's knife, the one I'd saved up for my stomach turned. The blade had a massive, jagged chip in it. I pressed my lips into a thin line, fighting the stinging sensation in my eyes. I refused to let myself cry. After 40 minutes of frantic scrubbing and cooking, I managed to put together 4 simple dishes. As soon as I set the plates on the dining table, Mrs. Sterling wrinkled her nose in disgust. "Is this it?" she demanded. "There are 8 of us here. How is this supposed to be enough?" "The fridge was empty, Mrs. Sterling," I replied, my voice steady so calm that it even surprised me. Mr. Sterling took a bite of the braised fish, grimaced, and set his fork down with a loud clatter. "This fish is way too salty. Do you realize how bad that is for my blood pressure?" Then Sarah, my sister-in-law, chimed in while shoving spoonfuls of rice into her 2 children's mouths. "And where's the spice? You know I can't stand bland food. Why didn't you make anything with a kick?" Rice was falling all over the floor as the kids fidgeted, but Michael just sat there, head down, shoveling food into his mouth without saying a single word. He acted as if this entire situation was perfectly normal. After dinner, I retreated to the kitchen to clean up the mountain of dishes. The entire family migrated to the living room, cranking the volume on the TV until the walls shook. Mrs. Sterling drifted into the kitchen, watching me scrub and criticize every motion. "This place is decent enough, I suppose," she muttered. "A bit cramped, though. My back has been killing me because the bed in the master suite is too soft. We need something firmer. Let's head to the store tomorrow and get a replacement." My hands froze in the soapy water. "Mrs. Sterling, just how long were you and Mr. Sterling planning on staying?" Mrs. Sterling let out a short, dismissive laugh. "Victoria, don't be so dramatic. Hassan's home is his parents' home, isn't it? Besides, Jason and his family need to be in the city for the kids' school. You'll need to handle the tuition and the logistics." I nearly dropped the platter I was holding. 8 people, living in my 2-bedroom Manhattan apartment, indefinitely. I dragged myself to the bedroom, feeling like a stranger in my own home. It was past 1 p.m. when Michael finally finished his shower and climbed into bed, scrolling aimlessly through his phone. I stood in the doorway, staring at the space that used to be my sanctuary, now feeling suffocated by the tension. "Come on, Victoria. Get in bed," Michael said, not even looking up from his screen. I closed the door behind me and finally let the question out. "Michael, you brought your parents and Jason's entire family here without saying a single word to me. Why didn't you discuss this with me first?" He looked at me, genuinely confused. "What's there to discuss? My parents wanted to visit the grandkids. It's a perfectly normal thing to do." "Normal? Your mother literally just told me they're moving in, and Jason's family of 4 is here for the long haul. Michael, this is our home, not a free hotel." I tried to keep my voice low, but my rage made it shake. Michael tossed his phone onto the nightstand, his expression hardening. "Victoria, stop being so dramatic. My parents worked their fingers to the bone to raise me. Now that I'm successful, it's only right that I provide for them. And Jason, he doesn't have a place in the city. Letting him stay here for a while so the kids can get settled is the bare minimum." "You're being incredibly selfish." "Selfish. My eyes widened, staring at the man I'd been with for 5 years, 2 years of dating, 3 years of marriage. When he was courting me, he promised to always respect me, to always put our life together first. Selfish? I echoed, my voice cold and precise. Michael, this isn't about me being selfish. This is about mutual respect and shared decision-making. This is our apartment. Not yours, not your family's. Mine and yours. And I am done being treated like an outsider in my own life. Since when did I become the selfish one? I asked, my voice trembling but sharp. Michael, this isn't about being selfish. This is about basic respect and the dignity of having a say in our own lives. This is our home, not a boarding house for your extended family to crash in whenever they please. Michael waved his hand dismissively, his face twisting into an expression of utter annoyance. Oh, give it a rest, Victoria. I know how you get always so rigid, always needing everything to be just so. But this is family. Can't you just be a little more accommodating for my sake? With that, he turned his back on me, signaling that the conversation was over. He had no intention of listening. I stood there, paralyzed, a chill creeping down my spine that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. This wasn't the first time Michael had unilaterally made a life-altering decision, and then expected me to play the role of the self-sacrificing wife. 6 months after our wedding, he'd taken $5,000 from our joint savings to loan to a friend, without even whispering a word to me. To this day, that money hasn't been seen again. Last Thanksgiving, he promised his relatives they could host their massive family reunion at our place. Over 30 people packed into our condo, and by the end of the night, my white designer sofa was ruined, stained with grease I could never scrub out. Every time I confronted him, he'd pull the family loyalty card, as if my setting a boundary was some heinous, selfish act. I walked to the bathroom, moving like a robot, and climbed into bed, hugging the very edge of the mattress, desperate not to let my skin brush against his. In the darkness, I stared at the ceiling, my mind drifting back to the beginning. It was a year ago at the International Design Association's annual gala. Michael was there as a partner representative, looking sharp in his tailored suit, holding court in a crowded room. We were seated at the same table, and the chemistry was instant. He was witty, attentive, and unlike so many men in our circles who only knew how to talk about their own portfolios, Michael actually listened. He pursued me for 2 years with a persistence that felt like a fairy tale. I still remember that rainy night when I was pulling an all-nighter at the office. I walked out of the building at midnight, exhausted, and there he was standing in the downpour for 2 hours, holding an umbrella, waiting for me. He drove me home, half of his jacket soaked through. "How did you know I was still working?" I had asked, touched. He just smiled, that charming, lopsided grin. "I look up at your office window every night. When I see the light is still on, I know my Victoria is still grinding." That was the moment he stole my heart completely. Our first 6 months of marriage were bliss until Mrs. Sterling, my mother-in-law, came to stay for a few days. From that moment on, Michael transformed. In front of her, he became a total chauvinist, refusing to lift a finger around the house and actively siding with her whenever she found something to nitpick. "Victoria, dear, you're not washing the dishes properly." Mrs. Sterling would chime in, her voice dripping with condescension. "Just leave them. I'll handle it." She proceeded to gut my kitchen, rearranging every cabinet and pantry shelf, destroying the organization I had meticulously curated for our apartment in Manhattan. Then came the wardrobe suggestions. "Victoria, a woman in your position shouldn't be wearing these skirts," she'd say, gesturing at my professional, high-end work attire. "They're far too short. Why don't you put these away?" And just like that, my expensive, custom-tailored skirts were shoved into the back of the closet. Each time, I stayed silent. I chose to bite my tongue, telling myself it was a small sacrifice to keep the peace. But tonight, looking at Michael's sleeping face, I realized the hard truth. My silence hadn't earned me respect. It had only invited them to trample all over me. 6 people crammed into our 2-bedroom condo, without a single discussion, without a single thought for my comfort. This wasn't a home anymore, it was a nightmare. I slid out of bed, my movements ghost-like, and stepped onto the balcony. The crisp New York autumn air bit at my skin, but it couldn't cool the boiling resentment in my chest. Below me, the city lights shimmered, vibrant and full of life, yet I felt like I was suffocating in the dark. Tomorrow, I had to head into the office, put on a smile, and act like my life wasn't falling apart. But as I gripped the cold steel railing, I knew one thing for certain. The girl who sacrificed everything for the sake of family had died tonight. I had a major design project due for the International Design Association by the end of the week, but my mind was a complete blank. Living under the same roof with 6 people, 2 rowdy kids, 2 overbearing in-laws, and a husband who checked out of our marriage long ago had turned my life into a chaotic nightmare. My phone screen flickered to life. A text from Sarah, my best friend. Lunch tomorrow at our usual spot. Bringing you some Swiss chocolates to cheer you up. I only typed back a single word, okay. Suddenly, I felt the stinging heat of tears behind my eyes. At least tomorrow I could finally vent to Sarah. She was the only one who truly understood, the only one who wouldn't judge. As I stared at the ceiling, I whispered to myself, I'm done playing the martyr. Michael and his family needed to understand that I wasn't their live-in housekeeper, or some puppet they could manipulate for their convenience. But how could I protect my dignity without blowing everything up? I tossed and turned until the sun began to peek through the blinds, eventually drifting into a fitful, shallow sleep. In my dreams, I was standing in my own home, yet I couldn't find a single corner that felt like it belonged to me. 6:08 a.m. Before the alarm even had a chance to go off, the sound of the kids shrieking jolted me awake. I rolled over, but the space beside me was cold. Michael was already gone. I dragged myself out of bed, a throbbing headache pulsing at my temples. I hadn't slept more than an hour. I opened the bedroom door, and the smell of greasy bacon and burnt eggs hit me like a physical wall. The living room was a disaster zone. Sarah, my sister-in-law, was clumsily feeding the kids, rice and mush scattered all over the hardwood floor. Mr. Sterling was buried behind his newspaper, and Mrs. Sterling was hovering over the stove. Michael and Jason were out on the balcony, smoking and laughing about something trivial. "Oh, Victoria, you're finally up," Mrs. Sterling called out without looking back. "I made porridge and fried eggs. Come grab a plate." I froze. I expected her to demand I cook breakfast for the entire house, but she'd done it herself. For a fleeting second, I wondered if I was overreacting. Maybe things weren't as bad as I thought. That naive thought evaporated the second I stepped into the bathroom. My makeup kit had been ransacked. Lipsticks were left uncapped, and my expensive foundation was smeared with greasy fingerprints. My luxury serum, the one that cost me nearly $300, more than half empty. A damp, mildewed towel lay discarded on the floor, and the toilet seat was, well, let's just say it was revolting. The drain was clogged with a thick clump of hair, leaving a puddle of stagnant, gray water pooling around my feet. I clenched my fists so hard my nails dug into my palms. This wasn't a family. This was an invasion. My private space, my hard-earned belongings, they treated them like garbage, using them as if they had no value at all. "Hey, hurry it up in there. The kids need to go," Sarah's voice barked from the other side of the door. I took a sharp, jagged breath. I splashed some water on my face, gave up on makeup, and grabbed my bag. I had to get out. The air in this house was suffocating, and I was starving for some sanity. The quiet, organized atmosphere of my office finally let me exhale. I sat at my desk, but I couldn't focus. The image of that filthy bathroom and the sound of the kids screaming kept looping in my head like a bad movie. At noon, I met Sarah at our usual cafe near my office. The moment I sat down and saw the genuine concern in her eyes, I completely fell apart. "Whoa, Victoria! What happened? Your eyes look like 2 swollen peaches," Sarah said, sliding the box of Swiss chocolates toward me. "Big fight with Michael again." I couldn't hide it. It all came pouring out, every detail from the sleepless night to the disgusting state of my bathroom that morning. Sarah listened, her expression shifting from shock to pure, unfiltered rage, before finally settling into a look of grim, heavy sympathy. Victoria, Sarah said, her voice dropping to a low, serious tone as she stirred her coffee. This isn't just some typical mother-in-law versus daughter-in-law drama. This is something much deeper. Victoria, listen to me. This isn't just some petty spat between a daughter-in-law and her in-laws. This is something much darker. Lynn swirled her coffee, her expression turning uncharacteristically grim. Michael isn't just disrespecting you. He's systematically erasing your autonomy. He brought 8 people into your home for an indefinite stay without so much as a conversation, and now he expects you to play the role of a live-in maid. This is a massive violation of your marital boundaries. I bit my lip, feeling the sting of truth. But Michael keeps saying it's about filial piety. He says family is supposed to be inclusive and forgiving, I whispered. Lynn, who rarely dropped an F-bomb, scoffed. Filial piety? That's total bull. Being a good son doesn't give him the right to trample all over his wife's feelings. A family doesn't get to steamroll your privacy and sanity. Do you know why Michael feels so comfortable doing this to you? Because deep down he assumes you'll never push back. He's counting on your silence. He thinks you'll just fold. Lynn's words hit me like a sledgehammer. I started replaying the last 3 years of my marriage in my head. Every time I had compromised, every time I had swallowed my pride to keep the peace, did Michael ever show more appreciation? No. He just treated me like I was becoming part of the furniture. My voice was barely a tremor. So, what should I do? Lynn grabbed my hand, her grip firm. First, you set boundaries. You look Michael in the eye and tell him exactly what is off limits. Second, you stop being their housekeeper immediately. And lastly, if he refuses to change, you need to take a long, hard look at whether this marriage is even worth saving. I nodded slowly, lost in thought. Lynn's advice reminded me of that women's studies course I took back in college. The professor used to say, patience isn't always a virtue. Sometimes it's just cowardice. Anger is the necessary spark for change. That afternoon, I stayed at the office late. I finished the draft for a major design project I'd been working on for the International Design Association. Even after I was done, I sat at my desk, dreading the commute back to that chaotic house. The thought of walking into that home made my stomach knot up. I stayed for 2 extra hours just to avoid it. When I finally walked out of the building, the Manhattan skyline was dark and glittering. My phone lit up with 3 missed calls from Michael and a text. You're still not home. The whole family is waiting for you to cook dinner. A cold, mirthless smile touched my lips. I locked my screen and shoved the phone into my bag. Let them wait. It was past 8:30 p.m. when I finally unlocked the front door. The house was unnervingly quiet. Mrs. Sterling, Mr. Sterling, and Jason's entire family were slumped on the sofa in the living room, surrounded by empty takeout containers and the remnants of a sad, cold meal. Michael was sitting at the dining table, his face a mask of irritation. Finally back, he snapped, his voice icy. Why weren't you answering your phone? We've been waiting for hours. I was working overtime. I replied, my voice steady. I walked right past him, heading toward the master bedroom. Michael followed me in and slammed the door behind him. Victoria, what is with that attitude? My parents and their relatives have been sitting here waiting for a meal, and you don't pick up your phone, then stroll in whenever you feel like it. You've got them eating greasy takeout. I spun around, locking eyes with him. Michael, I'm not the household maid. I have a career. If I'm working late, that's life. If they were hungry, they could have done exactly what they did tonight, ordered food for themselves. Michael stood there, stunned. He clearly hadn't expected me to push back. A few seconds later, he lowered his voice, his tone patronizing. Keep your voice down. What if my parents hear you? They came all the way from out of state to visit. You need to be more understanding. I cut him off. Understanding. Understanding what exactly? They moved into our home indefinitely, they've taken over every inch of our space, and they've been using my personal belongings like they're at a hotel. Michael, this is our home, not a guest house for your extended family. Michael's face flushed a deep, ugly red. Victoria, you've changed. You're becoming so selfish. My parents sacrificed everything to raise me. Now that I'm finally in a position to provide for them, I want them to stay for a while. What's the big deal? A while? I let out a sharp, cold laugh. You call this a while? Your mother made it crystal clear that they aren't just visiting for the weekend, Michael. They're planning to move in indefinitely along with Jason, his wife, and their 2 kids. We bought this luxury condo in New York City to build our own life, not to turn it into a boarding house for your entire extended family. Michael's face flushed a deep, indignant red. You've changed, Victoria. You've become so incredibly selfish. My parents sacrificed everything to raise me. Now that I'm finally in a position to provide for them, you're acting like this. It's only for a little while. For a little while? I let out a cold, sharp laugh. Before he could retort, the bedroom door swung open without a knock. Mrs. Sterling stood there, her face set in a practiced saccharine smile. Oh, you 2 children, always bickering over nothing. Victoria, honey, don't be so cold-hearted. You should be grateful for the chance to show some respect to your elders. By the way, Jason's kids found some old papers in your office, and were playing with them. I hope that's all right? My blood went ice cold. My office. I bolted past her, my heart hammering against my ribs. When I crossed the threshold, the sight that met my eyes made my stomach churn. My project files, the ones I'd spent 3 grueling months preparing for an elite client at the International Design Association, were scattered like trash across the hardwood floor. Some pages were torn, others were smeared with thick, waxy crayon scribbles. A few had been folded into jagged paper airplanes, lying crumpled under the desk. Who gave them permission to go in there? I screamed, my voice trembling with a mix of fury and disbelief. Sarah, Jason's wife, leaned against the doorframe, lazily filing her nails. Relax, they're just kids being curious. It's just some paper, Victoria. Why are you making such a big deal out of nothing? I knelt down, my fingers hovering over a masterpiece now ruined by toddler scribbles. This wasn't just paper. This was my professional reputation. This was 3 months of late nights, endless revisions, and career-defining labor. The deadline was tomorrow morning. Everything was gone. Michael walked in, his brow furrowed in annoyance. Victoria, stop overreacting. They're just children. They don't know any better. Can't you just print it again? I couldn't believe my ears. I turned to him, my voice deathly quiet. Print it again. These are original blueprints, Michael. Proprietary designs. You don't just hit T on these. Do you have any idea that this contract is worth $150,000? If I can't recover this by sunrise, I lose the client, the commission, and my standing in the industry. The room fell into a suffocating silence. Even Sarah stopped her posturing. Mrs. Sterling's hands trembled as she clutched her purse, her voice cracking. Oh, $150,000. How could it be that expensive? What are we supposed to do now? I stood up, forcing myself to inhale deeply. Rage wouldn't fix this. Panic would bury me. I looked straight at Michael, my gaze icy. Get them out of this room. All of you. Now, I have work to do. Michael opened his mouth to protest, but one look at the sheer intensity in my eyes made him falter. He simply nodded and ushered his family out. As the door clicked shut, I locked it, sat down at my station, and started working like a woman possessed. Tears blurred my vision, but I wiped them away, refusing to stop. I wasn't going to let them break me. I stayed glued to the screen until 3:30 a.m., my back aching and my eyes burning. I managed to cobble together a version not the perfection I had originally crafted, but enough to satisfy the client. When I finally hit save, I slumped back into my chair, completely hollow. In that moment, the realization hit me with the weight of a freight train. This apartment wasn't a sanctuary anymore. It was a black hole, feeding on my energy, my career, and my sanity. If I didn't make a move, I was going to lose everything I'd worked for. I quietly opened the door to check the hallway. Michael was sprawled out on the sofa, fast asleep. I didn't wake him. I retreated to the bedroom and lay in the dark, staring at the ceiling, forming a plan. Starting tomorrow, everything would be different. I would document every unreasonable demand and every instance of their intrusive behavior. I was done being the silent host. I was done serving them for free. And if Michael chose his family over his wife, then he'd be choosing his future without me. Outside the window, the faint, gray light of dawn began to bleed into the New York skyline. A new day was breaking, and so was my passivity. The counterattack had officially begun. For the next 3 days, I moved with the precision of a machine. By day, I poured my remaining soul into the client project. By night, I silently logged every grievance and locked myself away, preparing for the day the walls would finally come crashing down. I spent the next 3 days operating like a machine. During the day, I poured every ounce of my energy into salvaging the project that had been sabotaged. At night, I returned home, quietly documenting everything, before locking myself in my home office until the early hours of the morning. I took photos of the bathroom, where my high-end makeup had been ransacked, and the kitchen, which looked like a disaster zone with crusty dishes piled in the sink. The living room walls were ruined with crayon marks. On top of that, I started tracking our expenses. In just 1 week, our household costs had tripled. On Friday evening, I checked our joint bank account and felt my blood run cold. There was a $15,000 outgoing transfer to a luxury car dealership. I walked into the living room, where Michael was watching TV with his father, Mr. Sterling. "Michael, what was that $15,000 transfer for?" I asked, my voice steady despite the adrenaline surging through me. Michael's face flickered with panic, but he quickly masked it with an annoyed shrug. "Oh, that? Jason wanted to buy a car to take the kids to school. He was short on the down payment, so I helped him out. It's a loan." "A loan?" I felt my jaw tighten. "That's our hard-earned savings, Michael. You didn't even consult me before handing over our money to your brother." Mr. Sterling chimed in immediately, his tone dripping with condescension. "Victoria, for heaven's sake. Brothers are supposed to help each other out. Michael is doing well for himself. What's the harm in giving his younger brother a hand?" I ignored him entirely, keeping my eyes locked on Michael. "This is our money, Michael. You don't have the right to make these unilateral decisions." Michael finally snapped, raising his voice. "He's my brother. It's only $15,000. You're blowing this completely out of proportion. Besides, I make more money than you do. The majority of that account is mine anyway." His words hit me like a physical blow to the chest. It felt as if he'd just taken a blade to everything I thought we stood for. Yes, he earned a bit more, but since the day we met, we had agreed that marriage was an equal partnership. There was no yours and mine. To hear him throw his income in my face to belittle me was unforgivable. I looked at him, my expression turning ice cold. "If that's how you really feel, then starting today we're separating our finances. From now on, we manage our own earnings, and we split all household expenses 50-50. Michael went silent, clearly stunned. He hadn't expected me to call his bluff. Mr. Sterling furrowed his brows, clearly offended. "Do you hear how you're talking? A married couple splitting bills like roommates? That's absurd." I didn't bother responding. I turned on my heel and walked straight into our bedroom, closing the door firmly behind me. That night, Michael didn't even attempt to come into the bedroom. He curled up on the sofa instead. Saturday morning, I woke up before the sun was even fully up. I decided to head into the office to put in some extra hours. Just as I was about to walk out the door, I saw Michael's phone lying on the kitchen island, plugged into the charger. A sudden thought struck me. I needed the truth. I hesitated for a heartbeat, then grabbed the phone. Thankfully, he still used our wedding anniversary as his passcode. I opened his messages and navigated straight to his chat with Jason. As I scrolled, the blood drained from my face. It wasn't just about the $15,000 for the car. Michael had promised to help Jason and his family find a preschool in the city, and he was already discussing converting my home office into a nursery for them. But the message that broke me was from Jason. Hey, what if she doesn't agree to all this? After all, the deed to the house is in both of your names. Michael's reply appeared on the screen, cold and calculating. Don't worry about it. She's soft-hearted. She'll throw a tantrum for a few days, and then get over it, just like always. Besides, I put down the majority of the down payment on the house. Even if we end up getting a divorce, she won't be walking away with much. My hands were shaking so violently that I nearly dropped the phone. All this time he was treating our marriage and our home as nothing more than a balance sheet. He had been planning this all along, waiting for me just to cool off and submit to his demands like I always had. I placed the phone back exactly where I found it and walked out of the apartment in a daze. It was a beautiful, sunny weekend morning in New York City, but I felt like I was standing in the middle of a blizzard. The office was empty, save for the low, rhythmic hum of the HVAC system. I slumped into my desk chair, my mind spinning with a million thoughts. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. It was a call from the director of my company. The Monday morning sun was streaming through my office windows, yet I felt a bone-chilling cold that had nothing to do with the air conditioning. The office was quiet, dead quiet. My desk was buried under stacks of blueprints, but my mind was a chaotic mess of personal wreckage. My phone buzzed, jolting me out of my trance. It was my boss. Victoria, listen. The board of directors from the Peace Group is coming in on Monday to review the design proposal for that massive commercial complex. Where are we on the presentation? My heart sank into my stomach. This project was the biggest account of my career, the kind of career-defining work that puts you on the map. But with the situation at home spiraling out of control, focus felt like a luxury I couldn't afford. I'm putting the finishing touches on it, sir. It'll be ready, I replied, my voice steady, though I was shaking on the inside. Good. This project is huge, Victoria. The leadership team is planning to put you in charge of the entire operation. If you nail this, a promotion and a significant salary bump by year-end are basically a done deal. Everything all right at home, by the way? Everything's fine, I lied. Fine? Hardly. My home had been taken over by uninvited guests. My peace of mind was shredded, and my husband, Michael, was clearly behind my back. I couldn't tell my boss that. I'm focused. I'll give it 110%. I hung up and let out a long, shaky breath. This project was my golden ticket, but if I stayed trapped in that domestic war zone, I was going to crash and burn. I had to make a move. That afternoon, I called Sarah, a friend from my college days who had since become a shark in the courtroom as a high-end divorce attorney. Victoria, to what do I owe the pleasure? It's not every day a client of your caliber calls me, Sarah said, her voice bright and professional. Sarah, I need legal advice, serious advice. I laid it all out, the invasion of my home, the lack of boundaries, the blatant disrespect, and Michael's shifting loyalties. There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Sarah finally spoke, her tone was cold and clinical. Victoria, based on what you're telling me, you've let them compromise your legal standing regarding shared assets. If they stay indefinitely and things turn litigious, this is going to be a nightmare to untangle. Sarah's advice was sharp. First, secure your personal assets immediately. Second, serve Michael and his family with a formal, non-negotiable move-out date. Third, document everything. I mean everything: the expenses, the text messages, photos of the house being trashed. If this ends up in family court, this documentation is the difference between keeping what's yours and losing half your net worth. The word divorce hit me like a physical blow. 5 years of marriage, 5 years of for better or worse had it really come to this. But then I remembered the cold, calculating tone Michael had used when he'd first mentioned the possibility of splitting up. It wasn't love anymore. It was a transaction. Maybe this marriage had been rotting from the inside out for a long time. Before heading home, I stopped at a high-end hardware store and bought a heavy-duty, fireproof safe. I needed a vault, not just a place to store papers. That night, I committed to a new strategy: quiet resistance. No more screaming, no more begging, No more playing the submissive wife. When I walked through the door, the familiar, suffocating sight awaited me. Michael and his brother, Jason, were nowhere to be found, but Mrs. Sterling and her daughter were in the kitchen, flour dusting every surface, as they made some messy, makeshift meal. My living room looked like a daycare center, after a hurricane toys scattered everywhere, the rug stained, the pristine aesthetic of my home completely dismantled. "You're home," Mrs. Sterling said, not even glancing up from the counter. "Help yourself to some food later." I didn't say a word. I walked straight past them, entered our bedroom, and clicked the lock behind me. I installed the safe, tucked my passport, property deeds, jewelry, and every sensitive legal document inside, and spun the dial. Dinner was a lonely affair. I took a small portion, ate in silence, and retreated back to my sanctuary. Michael knocked on the door later, trying to initiate some hollow conversation, but I hid behind the excuse of a heavy workload and kept the door shut. Lying in the dark, staring at the ceiling, my plan began to crystallize. Monday was the big presentation. I needed to be sharp, and I needed an environment where I could breathe. "I have to get out of here," I whispered to myself. The thought took root. A quiet, luxury apartment somewhere just for me wouldn't just give me the space to finalize the project. It would send a message to Michael that I wasn't just another asset to be managed. I was done being the victim. I would start looking for a place first thing tomorrow. The silence of the room felt like freedom. It was time for the real Victoria to take control. Monday morning. The moment I submitted my proposal, I knew it was time. No more arguments, no more pleading, and certainly no more excuses. I wasn't going to waste my breath on another confrontation. I was going to let my actions speak for themselves. Beyond the window, the moon hung heavy in the New York City sky, and in that eerie, perfect silence, I made the decision that would alter the trajectory of my life. I realized that the Victoria who had spent years playing the submissive, silent wife was gone. I packed a single carry-on, my laptop, a few essentials, and just enough clothes to get by. Michael was still fast asleep, his breathing rhythmic and untroubled, completely unaware that his world was about to shift. I didn't wake him. I simply left a note on the nightstand. "I need some space to clear my head. I'll be staying away for a few days." I checked into a sleek, upscale serviced apartment, just a short commute from my office in Midtown. It was pricey and indulgence, really, but the minimalist design and the absolute, blissful silence were worth every single dollar. As I dropped my bag on the hardwood floor, I took a deep breath. For the first time in years, the crushing weight in my chest actually lifted. The presentation with the Sterling Group the next day was a massive success. The clients were blown away by the vision I'd laid out. My director was beaming, shaking my hand firmly. "Victoria, you've been on fire lately. Keep this up, and your name is going to be at the top of the list for the upcoming promotion." I gave him a professional smile and a polite thank you, but internally, I felt a sharp sting of irony. If only he knew that my professional breakthrough was only possible because I'd finally walked out on the toxic environment at home. At 3:00 p.m., my phone started buzzing incessantly. It didn't stop. 10 missed calls from Michael, followed by a barrage of texts. "Where are you? Why aren't you picking up? My parents are worried sick, come home, and we can talk about this." Then, the final text made my blood run cold. "Jason can't keep sleeping on the couch. I'm going to have him move his things into your home office tonight." My home office. That was my sanctuary, filled with my specialized reference books and confidential design files. My fingers flew across the screen as I typed back, ice in my veins. "That office is my professional workspace. No one is authorized to touch my equipment or occupy that room. I have a massive project to finish. I won't be home." Michael called instantly. I declined the call and sent a quick text. "If you have something to say, put it in writing. I'm in a meeting." His reply was flooded with raw, entitled indignation. "Victoria, what exactly do you think you're doing? My parents are at home waiting for dinner, and you've just up and checked yourself into a hotel. Do you have any idea how much stress you're putting on them?" I didn't dignify that with a response. I silenced the phone and tossed it aside. Stress. They were worried about one thing: who would be left to serve them dinner? The next 3 days were a masterclass in productivity. I poured every ounce of my focus into my work, answering Michael's frantic messages only when absolutely necessary, and always with a cold, detached brevity. The silence of the apartment was my fuel. I finished the full-scale proposal for the Sterling Group 2 days ahead of schedule. Thursday evening, as I walked out of the office building into the brisk city air, Michael was already standing there, waiting for me. His face was a mask of dark frustration. "So, you finally decided to face me?" He stepped into my path, forcing me to stop. "Do you have any idea how difficult you've made these past few days? My parents keep asking when you're coming back, and the house is cramped. Jason and his family are still stuck in the living room." I looked him dead in the eyes, my voice steady, devoid of the anxiety he was so used to seeing. "So that's my fault, Michael. Do you remember when we bought that place? We agreed it was our home, not a hostel for your relatives." Michael froze, his expression faltering. He lowered his voice, shifting into damage control mode. "Victoria, come on. Let's find somewhere to talk." We ducked into a nearby cafe. Michael ordered 2 coffees and reached across the table, his hand hovering over mine, trying to bridge the gap with a physical gesture he thought would fix everything. I didn't pull away, but I didn't lean in either. I just watched him, waiting to see what lie he would tell next. I pulled my hand back instinctively. Sensing my coldness, Michael tried to adopt a tone of sincere regret. "Victoria, I know you're upset, but let's be reasonable. My parents are getting older, and it's only natural for them to stay with us for a few days. As for Jason and his family, I agree they've been here way too long. I'll talk to them, I promise." I looked up at him, my eyes steady. "How long, Michael? A month? 2 weeks?" 2 weeks, he blurted out, clearly desperate to end the interrogation. "I give you my word, I'll get them moved out within 2 weeks." I remained silent, slowly stirring my coffee. 2 weeks sounded reasonable on the surface, but a flash of the text messages I'd seen him send to Jason clouded my judgment. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was being played. "Michael, I need you to understand a few things," I said, setting my spoon down with a sharp clink against the saucer. "First, I am not the live-in housekeeper for your extended family. Second, my career is demanding. I am a lead designer for the International Design Association, and I cannot have my professional life constantly disrupted. And third, from now on, any major withdrawals from our joint account require both of our signatures." A flicker of irritation crossed Michael's face. "Money? Really? Why are you suddenly being so transactional? We're married. Victoria, what's yours is mine." "Then try to remember that," I replied, meeting his gaze head-on. "Because from the moment you decided to move 8 people into our home without consulting me, and then transferred $2,000 of our savings to your brother behind my back, this marriage stopped being a partnership. It became a one-sided arrangement where I'm expected to have infinite patience while you bleed our finances dry." Michael slammed his hand onto the table, drawing stares from other customers in the Manhattan cafe. "Fine, say whatever you want, but you need to come home tonight. My parents are already wondering why we're acting like we're on the verge of a divorce. Do you want to humiliate me in front of them?" Humiliation, of course. In Michael's world, his social standing and his family's approval always trumped my feelings. "I'll go back," I said, my voice eerily calm, though my blood was boiling. "But not tonight. I have a major project due, and I need to finish it without the chaos. I'll be back on the weekend to pick up the rest of my things." Michael finally lost his composure. "Victoria, don't be ridiculous. Do you have any idea what the neighbors are saying? Everyone thinks my wife has just up and left me. My parents are here, and I have to keep up appearances." I grabbed my bag and stood up. "You only care about what outsiders think. You've never once stopped to ask yourself how you pushed this marriage to the breaking point." I walked out of the cafe and didn't head back to my temporary apartment. Instead, I wandered toward a nearby park. The early autumn breeze in New York City was biting, cutting through my blazer. I sat on a park bench, watching the couples strolling by and children playing in the distance. It hit me then the problem between Michael and me wasn't just about his family invading our space. It was a fundamental disconnect in our values, our views on marriage, our definitions of family, and the total lack of mutual respect. These were chasms, and they wouldn't just vanish once his relatives packed their bags. On Friday evening, I finally returned to the apartment. As I approached the door, I was stunned to see Mrs. Sterling standing there, waiting. "Victoria! Thank heavens you're finally home," she said, flashing a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was holding a heavy pot. "I brought some chicken soup to help you get your strength back." I took the pot, feeling a wave of weariness as I invited her inside. The moment she stepped through the door, her eyes immediately began scanning the living room, analyzing every detail. "This place must be costing you a fortune in rent, right?" "Such a waste," she muttered, shaking her head. "Michael told me you needed a quiet place to work, but honestly, our house isn't even that noisy." I didn't answer. I just poured her a glass of water and sat down across from her. "Victoria," Mrs. Sterling began, her tone shifting from casual critique to forced solemnity. "You and Michael have been married for 3 years now. It's time you start thinking about having children. A woman's career is all well and good, but at the end of the day, a family isn't complete without a baby. Look at Jason's home, those 2 little ones are just adorable." I interrupted her firmly. "Michael and I have our own plans, Mrs. Sterling." She waved her hand dismissively. "Plans? What plans? You're young, just have the kids and stop overthinking everything. Besides, you haven't been home for days, and Michael has been absolutely miserable. A hot-tempered man needs a patient wife." Hearing those words, I felt a chill settle deep in my bones. To Mrs. Sterling, everything I stood for, my career, my boundaries, my autonomy, was secondary to her son's comfort. My heart felt heavy as I looked at her. "Mrs. Sterling, do you even realize that I spent 3 months on a design portfolio for a high-profile client, only for the kids to completely destroy it?" I asked, my voice steady. "That project was $6,500. It was my career on the line." Her face went blank for a second, then she scoffed. "They're just children, Victoria. They don't know any better. And you finished it anyway, didn't you?" "Yes," I replied, meeting her eyes with a cold, piercing stare. "But only because I stayed up for 3 straight nights to redo the entire thing from scratch. You might not value my work, but it is my livelihood. It is my dignity." She gave an awkward, dismissive laugh. "I didn't mean it like that. We're family, Victoria. You shouldn't be so petty about these things." I stood up abruptly. "It's getting late. Let me walk you to your car." After I saw Mrs. Sterling off, I stared at the pot of chicken soup she'd insisted on making. The aroma filled the kitchen, but for the first time, it didn't feel like an act of love. It felt bitter. Beneath that thin layer of concern was a quiet, suffocating sense of control. That weekend, I went back to the house to pack some essentials. As I pushed open the door to my home office, the sight that met me made my breath hitch in my throat. My sanctuary had been turned into a makeshift bedroom. My books, my professional reference materials, and my sketches were shoved haphazardly into a corner. A crumpled original design was jammed into a shelf. I walked toward the bedroom, my heart racing, only to find my closet doors hanging open. My clothes had been shoved to one side, and Sarah's dresses were hanging where my things should have been. Michael stepped out of the bathroom, startled to see me standing there. "Oh, Sarah said she didn't have enough closet space at her place, so I told her she could hang some stuff here for a while." I took a deep, jagged breath, trying to suppress the volcano of rage bubbling inside me. I didn't say a word. I simply grabbed a large duffel bag and started pulling my things off the hangers. "What are you doing?" Michael panicked, rushing over. "Victoria, don't be dramatic. I'll tell Sarah to move her stuff out, okay?" No, I said, my voice eerily calm. Michael, you've clearly made your choice. There's no space left for me in this house. What are you talking about? It's just a few dresses. Why are you making such a big deal out of nothing? Michael grabbed my arm, but I yanked it away, a look of pure disgust on my face. Just a few dresses. My office is gone, my closet is invaded, my work is destroyed, and you're handing over our private space to your sister. Michael, at what point does it become a big deal to you? In the living room, Mr. and Mrs. Sterling and Jason's family were dead silent, ears pressed against the hallway, listening to our every word. Michael lowered his voice, his face turning red. Victoria, stop making a scene. My parents are right there. Oh, of course. Everything is about who's listening. I laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. I zipped up my bag and turned toward the door. Fine. Go then. Michael raised his voice, his insecurity flaring up. Let's see how long you last on your own. I didn't answer him. I grabbed my bag and headed straight for the front door. As I walked past the living room, Mrs. Sterling started to stand up, ready to lecture me. But I didn't even glance her way. I walked out of the house that I had once called home, and I didn't look back. Once I reached my serviced apartment, I locked the door and finally let the tears fall. 5 years of dating, 3 years of marriage in the end. I realized that to Michael, I was never a priority. He would rather let me walk away than face the reality of how much he had hurt me. After I composed myself, I washed my face and opened my laptop. I started searching for a reputable divorce attorney and sent a message to my friend, asking for the next steps to protect my assets. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Michael, come back home. I told Jason and Sarah to move out. I stared at the screen, his desperate, late apology doing absolutely nothing to my pulse. The regret was coming too late. He only knew how to value something once he realized he was about to lose it, for good. But this time, I wasn't so sure I even wanted to go back. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the New York City night was an impenetrable veil of darkness. I knew that from this moment on, my life was veering into entirely uncharted territory. Regardless of what the future held, at least it would be a path I had chosen for myself. Morning in my new apartment felt unnervingly quiet. There was no sound of a restless child, no sharp, nagging voice of Mrs. Sterling echoing through the hallway, and no booming, impatient outbursts from Michael. As the sun crept through the curtains, casting a warm, golden glow across the bed, I opened my eyes. It was a serenity I hadn't felt in years. My phone screen lit up with 3 unread messages, all from Michael. When are you planning on coming home? Jason promised he'd move out by next week. Just come back. Let's sit down and talk like adults. I didn't reply. I simply rose, showered, and prepared to face the day. Today marked the official launch of the second phase of our project with the Hobain Corporation. As the lead designer, I needed to be firing on all cylinders. During the morning briefing, the director announced my promotion. Effective immediately, Victoria was officially the new lead designer, with a 30% salary bump. Everyone, let's give Victoria a round of applause. The room erupted in cheers. I smiled and offered a polite thank you, but deep down, a bitter, metallic taste lingered in my mouth. If only marriage worked like a corporate career where your hard work and dedication were consistently recognized and rewarded. During the lunch break, Sarah pulled me up to the rooftop terrace for a quick bite. So, you actually moved out, she said, biting into her turkey sandwich, her eyes narrowing as she studied my expression. Best decision you've ever made. How did Michael handle it? I gave her the highlights of yesterday's explosive argument. Sarah shook her head, visibly frustrated. They practically took over your home office and your walk-in closet, like they were staking a claim in the Wild West. Is Michael playing the idiot, or is he genuinely that oblivious? I think, to them, a woman shouldn't need her own space, I sighed. To them, it's all about a man's ego and keeping the family peace at the expense of my sanity. Sarah looked at me, her expression turning serious. Victoria, what are you going to do? I don't know, I whispered, staring out at the distant, shimmering skyscrapers of Manhattan. A part of me still wanted to salvage this marriage, but another part was simply exhausted by the endless cycle of stifling compromise. Listen to me, Sarah said, reaching out to squeeze my hand. Whatever you choose, I've got your back. But remember, you don't owe anyone a life of misery. Back at my desk, I found an email from my attorney, Lee. It contained a detailed breakdown of the divorce proceedings and the legal principles regarding asset division. Lee had even highlighted how Michael's recent financial negligence could be a critical factor for the court when assessing the obligations and liabilities of each party. I saved the document, but didn't have the heart to read through the specifics yet. In the deepest, most irrational part of my heart, I still wanted to give Michael one final chance to realize exactly how far he had pushed me to the edge. When I clocked out that evening, I froze in my tracks. Michael was standing in the lobby, waiting for me. He was clutching a massive bouquet of red roses, wearing a smile I hadn't seen in years. "Congratulations on the promotion," he said, thrusting the flowers into my arms. "I made a reservation at that French bistro you love. Let's celebrate." I stood there, stunned. Michael remembered my promotion. He had actually made reservations. This was the same man who used to belittle my career at every turn. Throughout dinner, Michael ordered every dish I loved and even insisted on opening a bottle of vintage wine. He chattered away about how chaotic the house had been, how much he missed my cooking, and how he had finally realized how vital I was to his life. "Victoria, Jason promised he'll be out by next week," Michael said, reaching across the table to grab my hand, his voice thick with desperation. "I was wrong. I shouldn't have dismissed your feelings like that. From now on, if anything comes up, I'll clear it with you first." "Okay." I searched his face, my resolve wavering just a fraction. But then, the question burned at the back of my throat. "And what about the $10,000? I asked quietly. Michael's expression hardened instantly, and a flicker of nervous panic crossed his eyes. The honeymoon phase of his apology had just hit a very cold wall. "Jason promised he'd pay it back in 6 months, Victoria. Just relax, will you?" I pulled my hand away from his, the cold reality hitting me harder than his words. It wasn't about the money, it was about the fact that he'd unilaterally decided to give away our savings without so much as a conversation. "It's not about the money, Jason. It's about the fact that you made a major decision behind my back. You didn't respect me enough to even ask." "I know I messed up," Jason said, putting on his best repentant husband face. "It won't happen again. Look, just come home. My parents really miss you." At the mention of Mr. and Mrs. Sterling, my heart turned to ice. "How much longer are they planning to stay, Jason?" He lowered his head, avoiding my gaze. "Dad wants to stay in New York City to get his back treated. I don't think they have a set departure date yet." I dropped my fork and knife onto my plate with a sharp clatter. "So, there was no end in sight. That's just perfect. There's still no clear boundary." "It's not like that." Jason panicked, his voice rising. "Have some compassion, Victoria. They're getting old." "What? Do you want me to kick them out on the street?" Compassion. That word again. How many times had I been forced to show compassion over the last 5 years, only for it to be met with endless demands and zero appreciation? "I need some space to think," I said firmly, finally cutting the conversation short. That night, back at my serviced apartment, I tossed the bouquet of flowers Jason had brought into the trash. The vibrant petals couldn't mask the rot at the foundation of our marriage. Jason still believed that his family's needs should always take precedence over my basic rights and sanity. For the next 2 weeks, I buried myself in my work, quietly observing Jason from a distance. Every day, his messages flooded my phone, a roller coaster of syrupy sweetness, followed by passive-aggressive guilt trips. I responded sparingly, but I remained steadfast in my decision not to go back to the house. On Friday afternoon, I was in the middle of a high-stakes meeting when my phone started vibrating incessantly. It was the 10th missed call from Jason. As soon as the meeting wrapped, I called him back, bracing myself for the storm. Victoria! Jason's voice was venomous. My mother is sick. She's running a fever of nearly 103 degrees. You're her daughter-in-law, don't you think you should be here to take care of her? I remained unnervingly calm. You can take her to the urgent care clinic or hire a professional nurse, Jason. Are you even human? Jason practically screamed into the receiver. My mother is suffering, and all you care about is your career. You are absolutely heartless. I felt a strange, chilling sense of clarity wash over me. I'm sorry to hear she's sick, Jason, but I'm not a doctor. Your responsibility is to get her medical help, not to use moral grandstanding to control me. Take her to the ER instead of trying to manipulate me. There was a tense silence on the other end, followed by a cold, cutting tone. Victoria, I think I finally see you for who you are. Selfish, cold-blooded, and completely lacking in basic decency. He hung up. My hands trembled, but inside a resolve hardened a calm, dangerous kind of determination. Jason would never understand. The problem wasn't whether his mother was sick. It was his expectation that I should be a mindless servant to his family's demands. At 8 p.m., the doorbell rang. I checked the peephole and saw Jason standing there, his face tight with anger. I hesitated, then opened the door. What are you doing here? Jason pushed past me, his eyes scanning the apartment with a look of disdain. Living the high life, aren't we? $300 a night for this place. You're burning through cash pretty fast. That is money I earned myself, Jason. How I spend it is my business. I shut the door, my voice steady. Why are you here? Jason whirled around, his eyes flashing with fury. Victoria, I went to your office today. I heard you're planning to go to Shanghai for 2 months to lead that new project for the International Design Association. Why the hell didn't you tell me? My heart skipped a beat. It was true. My director had approached me today about heading the implementation phase of the project in China. I hadn't even made up my mind yet Jason already knew. I'm considering it, I said flatly. If the job requires it, I'll go. The job? Jason sneered. Stop playing games. You just want to run away from my family, don't you? Admit it. And for the record, you do not have my permission to leave. I stared directly into Michael's eyes, refusing to blink. Michael, on what authority do you think you can issue commands to me? The authority of your husband, Michael roared, his voice echoing off the walls of our apartment. He looked absolutely unhinged. What kind of decent woman just abandons her husband for a 2-month work trip? Have you no shame? Don't you have a shred of decency left in you? I looked at his flushed, distorted face, and the last shred of affection I had for him evaporated. The man I had once loved to my very core now openly despised my career and my sense of self-worth. It was heartbreaking, but it was also clarifying. Michael, I said, my voice steady, though my heart was pounding against my ribs, we need time apart to rethink everything. Just go home. Rethink? Michael suddenly lunged forward, grabbing my shoulders. His grip was bruising. Is that it? Is there some other guy? Is that why you're so desperate to get out of this house? I froze. I couldn't believe he had the audacity to say that. The gaslighting was so blatant it felt like a physical blow. I shoved his hands off me and pointed toward the door. Get out. Get out of my house right now. Michael didn't budge. Instead, he reached into his jacket pocket and slammed a stack of papers onto the dining table. Then explain this. My eyes darted to the documents. It was a printed copy of an email from my colleague Sarah regarding legal counsel. He had been snooping through my private files. You had the nerve to go through my personal things? My voice trembled with pure, unadulterated rage. I'm your husband. I have a right to know everything about your life, Michael shouted, his face turning a deep shade of crimson. Let me make one thing crystal clear. Don't you dare try to file for divorce. That down payment for this house. My family put up the majority of the money. If you try to leave, you won't walk away with a single cent. In that moment, everything finally crumbled. The threats, the control, the complete lack of respect, all the rot in our marriage was laid bare, exposed under the harsh light of reality. "Get out," I repeated, my voice ice cold. "If you don't leave this second, I'm calling the police." Michael stood there, stunned. He clearly hadn't expected me to be this resolute. With a final, venomous glare, he stormed toward the door. "Just you wait," he spat. The front door slammed shut with a force that shook the frames on the walls. I slumped onto the floor, my entire body shaking. But strange as it was, beneath the anger and the crushing disappointment, I felt a wave of relief. The mask had fallen off. I didn't have to pretend anymore that our marriage was salvageable. The next morning, a Saturday, I woke up early. I was done waiting. I decided to officially consult an attorney about the divorce proceedings. Sarah had recommended a high-profile colleague who specialized in high-stakes family law. We met at a quiet, upscale cafe in Manhattan. I laid it all out for her, every detail. I showed her the evidence, the shredded documents, the personal journals, the logs of his reckless spending, the bank statements showing his unauthorized transfers of $50,000, and even the audio recording from the previous night. "Victoria," the lawyer said, pushing her glasses up the bridge of her nose, "with the evidence you've collected, you have a massive advantage in the asset division, especially regarding the real estate. Even though both your names are on the deed, the court will look at the contribution ratio." I nodded slowly. When we bought the place, my parents had gifted me $300,000, while Michael's family contributed $500,000. We had taken out a mortgage for the rest, and I've been paying half of the mortgage payments for years, I added. "Exactly," the lawyer continued. "Plus his unilateral decisions regarding marital assets and his blatant, unjustified interference in your professional life will weigh heavily against him in court." Leaving the cafe, I spent the entire night deep in thought. If I stayed, I would be trapped in this toxic cycle forever. The assignment in Shanghai wasn't just a career opportunity, it was my ticket to reclaiming my life. I had made up my mind. I would accept the assignment in Shanghai, and I would move forward with the divorce immediately. That evening, I picked up my phone and sent a brief, final text to Michael. "I've officially accepted the assignment in Shanghai. I'll be gone for 2 months. Before I head out, we need to meet and finalize the divorce papers." I sent the text, and Michael replied almost instantly. "Finalize what? Your little stunt to run away from home. If you walk out that door, don't even think about coming back. Keep the money, just don't return." I didn't bother responding. In Michael's eyes, I wasn't a partner, an equal, or even a person. I was just an asset he owned, a trophy that was expected to be submissive and quiet. That Sunday, I returned to our home in Manhattan to pack the rest of my belongings. I used my key to unlock the door, and the living room was quiet. Mrs. Sterling was lying on the sofa, her face drawn and pale. Jason was nowhere to be found. He was likely out, probably causing trouble elsewhere. "Hi, Mrs. Sterling. I hope you're feeling a bit better," I said, keeping my tone polite but detached. She let out a sharp, dismissive huff. "I'm not dead yet, if that's what you're wondering. Why are you even back? I thought you were so eager to pack your bags and abandon this family." I didn't dignify her rudeness with an answer. I walked straight past her into the master bedroom. I froze the moment I opened the closet. My clothes, which used to hang with precision, were shoved carelessly into a corner, crammed into a tiny space. The rest of the massive closet was packed tight with the wardrobes of Jason's family. My vanity, once my sanctuary, had been stripped of my high-end skincare and replaced with Sarah's cheap, drugstore cosmetics. In that heartbeat, the reality hit me. There was no space for me here, not physically, and certainly not emotionally. I didn't waste another second. I grabbed my essentials, tossing my life into a suitcase. Just as I was dragging my bags toward the foyer, Mrs. Sterling called out, her voice sharp and brittle. "Victoria, are you really going through with this divorce?" I turned around, meeting her gaze with a calm that clearly unsettled her. "Mrs. Sterling, that's ultimately up to Michael. But one thing is for certain, I am done living my life to satisfy everyone else's expectations. She stayed silent for a long moment, then let out a heavy, tired sigh. Michael has been spoiled his entire life. He's always believed the world revolves around him. I was stunned by her sudden moment of transparency. But then she pivoted, her tone sharpening again. But divorce? Do you have any idea how much of a scandal that would be? Can't you just give him another chance? I shook my head, my expression unyielding. I've given him far more chances than he ever deserved, Mrs. Sterling. I closed my eyes for a brief second, feeling the weight of the last few years finally beginning to lift. I hope you feel better. Goodbye. Stepping out of that front door, I felt light as if a crushing burden had been surgically removed from my shoulders. The future, the upcoming project in Shanghai, the legal battle for the divorce was still uncertain. But I wasn't afraid. For the first time, I was choosing to respect myself. I looked up at the New York skyline, watching a flock of birds trace a path across the sky. I took a deep breath, gripped the handle of my suitcase, and started walking toward my new life. The 2 months in Shanghai flew by. The peace project was so demanding that I barely had a moment to catch my breath, but I loved it. I was finally fully immersed in my career, surrounded by colleagues who actually valued my input. They treated me with respect, never once questioning my authority or assuming my gender dictated my capability. Throughout those 2 months, Michael only reached out once. It was a text, oozing with bitterness. "So you actually went to Shanghai? Fine. Stay there. Don't even think about coming back to this house." I didn't reply. Instead, I saved the message as evidence. Every week, Sarah would video call me to catch up. Through her, I learned that Michael had been going around telling everyone that I'd run off with a wealthy boss, doing his best to assassinate my character. Luckily, most of our friends knew exactly who I was and weren't buying into his pathetic lies. Then, just the other day, Sarah hesitated before she spoke. "Victoria, you wouldn't believe it. His entire family has moved into your place. They've completely taken over the master bedroom. Mrs. Sterling has been going around telling everyone you were cold-hearted enough to abandon your husband." I let out a cold, sharp laugh. "So, all 6 of them are squatting in my home now?" "Yeah," Sarah replied, her voice filled with disbelief. "They're basically living like they own the place. They've basically moved into your home, taken over the master suite, and your mother-in-law has been going around town painting you as the heartless villain who abandoned her son," Sarah said, her voice laced with genuine frustration. I let out a cold, sharp laugh. "So, there were 6 of them living under my roof now. My own home had been turned into a boarding house for his entire family." "Victoria," Sarah hesitated. "They even cleared out your things and shoved them into the storage room. Your entire collection of rare art books, your design archives, everything is just dumped in there, gathering dust." A sharp, physical ache tightened in my chest. Some of those books were out of print, rare editions I'd spent years tracking down across the globe. And those design files, they were the culmination of my entire career, the foundation I'd need to rebuild my life. "Thanks for telling me, Sarah," I said, forcing my voice to remain steady, though my blood was boiling. "I think it's time I go back and settle this once and for all." As my project in Shanghai reached its final stages, the director flew in from New York to meet with the team. He pulled me aside for a private conversation. "Victoria, you've done an incredible job over the past few months," he said sincerely. "The firm wants you to stay here in Shanghai as the new head of design for the East China region. We're ready to offer you a significant salary bump and full relocation support. I hope you'll seriously consider it. It's a massive promotion, a better lifestyle, and, perhaps most importantly, a chance to put some distance between you and that city full of painful memories." I appreciated his belief in my potential, but I had unfinished business. The divorce, the house, the betrayal. I couldn't just leave it all behind. "Thank you for the vote of confidence," I replied. "I need a little time to think it over." Back at my hotel, I immediately called my attorney. I decided that once the project wrapped, I was flying back to New York to file for divorce and reclaim what was rightfully mine. On my final night in Shanghai, I stood at the top of the Oriental Pearl Tower, looking out at the shimmering skyline. The city lights stretched out like a river of stars, reminding me that life was full of infinite possibilities. I was just getting started. When my flight touched down in New York, I didn't alert anyone. I headed straight to my lawyer's office to finalize our strategy for the divorce and the division of assets. Afterward, I went to stay at Sarah's place. "When are you planning to face Michael?" Sarah asked, handing me a mug of hot tea. "Tomorrow," I said, taking a deep breath. "First, I'm going back to the house to retrieve my things, and then I'm making the divorce official." The following morning, I unlocked the front door of the house that was supposed to be our sanctuary. The sight that greeted me was enough to make me lose my breath. The master bedroom had been converted into a guest room for Jason and his wife. My wedding photos were gone, replaced by portraits of their family. In my home office, my rare books had been crammed into cardboard boxes, left to collect grime. In the living room, the wedding photo of Michael and me had vanished, replaced by a massive group shot of his entire family. "Who's there?" Jason stepped out of the hallway, his jaw dropping when he saw me. "Victoria, what are you doing here?" I didn't bother answering him. I walked straight toward the bedroom to survey the damage. "Hey! Don't go digging around in there," Jason shouted, blocking the doorway. "Michael said all your stuff is in the storage room." "This is my house," I said, meeting his gaze with a look so cold it made him flinch. "What I choose to look for is my business. And for the record, don't call me Victoria, we are no longer family." The storage room was a disaster. Many of the boxes were damp, and my precious books and design files were ruined. I clenched my fists, forcing myself to suppress the rage bubbling inside me as I salvaged what I could. Just then, the door swung open. "What's for lunch?" Michael's voice echoed through the hallway. He stopped dead in his tracks when he saw me. After months of not seeing him, he looked disheveled. He'd gained weight, his hair was a mess, and he looked entirely unkempt. "I'm here to pack my things," I said, my voice sharp and final. "And while I'm at it, I'm informing you that I've retained a lawyer to initiate divorce proceedings." The shock flashed across Michael's face before his expression hardened into something ugly. "Divorce? Keep dreaming," Michael scoffed. "I put the most money into this house. You think you can just walk away whenever you want? The law isn't on your side." I stared directly into his eyes, unfazed. "Check the deed, Michael. Both our names are on it. This is marital property, and you're going to regret the day you decided to cross me. If we can't reach a mutual agreement, we'll settle this in court." Michael lunged forward, his grip tightening around my wrist like a vice. "Victoria, don't be ridiculous. You're talking about divorce just because my family is staying with us for a few weeks. Have you lost your mind?" I yanked my arm away, feeling a jolt of cold realization. "Michael, you still don't get it, do you? This was never about your family crashing on our couch. It's about the fact that you have never, once, shown me an ounce of genuine respect. You make every major decision without consulting me. You treat our joint savings like your personal piggy bank for Jason, and you treat my assets like they're yours to squander. In your eyes, I'm just an accessory, a trophy wife, not a partner." "That is complete bullshit," Michael barked, his face flushing a deep, angry red. "Have I not treated you well? You wanted for nothing. I gave you everything you asked for." "I wanted respect, Michael. I wanted equality. I wanted a partnership where my voice actually carried weight." My voice trembled, but I kept my composure. 5 years, and you've never once listened to what I actually needed. You just assumed I'd stay silent forever." Our shouting match was echoing down the hallway. I could hear the neighbors murmuring outside, their curiosity piqued. Seeing them leaning out of their doorways, I lowered my voice and gestured for us to move inside, away from prying eyes. Back in the living room, a space that suddenly felt like a tomb, I pulled a thick folder from my bag. It was the settlement agreement my attorney had prepared. I slid it across the marble coffee table. "This is the divorce decree," I said, my voice steady. "We'll sell the house at market value. After we pay off the mortgage, we'll divide the proceeds based on our original contributions. Your parents put in $500,000, I put in $300,000, and the remaining equity will be split down the middle." Michael glanced at the document and let out a dry, mocking laugh. "Keep dreaming, Victoria. The property value has skyrocketed to over $1 million. You think you're getting a cut of that? Keep dreaming. The court will decide, and you'll walk away with nothing." I calmly tucked the document back into my bag. "Fine, but let's talk about the $50,000 you funneled to Jason over the last few months without my consent. I'll be demanding a full audit and reimbursement for my share. And let's not forget the collection of rare books you ruined. That's another $30,000 in damages I'll be seeking." Michael shot up from the couch, his eyes wide with disbelief. "You've been tracking my spending? You are honestly terrifying, Victoria." "It's called financial responsibility, Michael. Something you clearly never learned." His face turned a sickly shade of purple. "Fine. You want a divorce? You've got it. But don't you dare think you're walking away with a single cent from this house. That money came from my parents. The court will see it that way." I picked up my purse, my eyes cold. "My lawyer will be in touch." I turned to leave, but Mrs. Sterling suddenly lunged out from the bedroom, dropping to her knees and grabbing my ankles. "Victoria, please. Don't leave Michael. He knows he messed up. Give him another chance, please." She began to wail, clutching my legs with a desperate grip. I realized then that this was a calculated move. She was banking on the neighbors filming the scene to use social media as leverage, hoping to shame me into staying. But the woman who stood there today was no longer the Victoria of the past, a womanified of public opinion and gossip. I looked down at her and spoke in a soft, firm tone. "Mrs. Sterling, please get up. If you truly cared about me, you wouldn't have spent 5 years enabling Michael to trample all over me. Marriage is between two people. Please respect my decision." She froze, stunned by my cold detachment. She hadn't expected me to call her bluff. As she loosened her grip in surprise, I seized the moment, stepped back, and strode toward the door. "Victoria!" Michael roared behind me. "You'll regret this. You're nothing without me." I didn't look back. I stepped into the elevator, and the steel doors slid shut. Only then, in the silence of the descending lift, did I let the tears fall. But I wasn't crying because the marriage was over. I was crying for the woman I used to be, the woman who had been lost in that hollow life for far too long. When I finally reached my apartment, I called my attorney immediately to recount the confrontation. He urged me to file for an emergency asset freeze to prevent Michael from liquidating any more funds. "And Victoria," he added firmly, "don't meet with Michael alone again. The situation is escalating. If you need to go back for your belongings, let's have a police escort present." For the next 2 weeks, the legal machinery roared to life. My journey to freedom had officially begun. I rented a modest, furnished apartment to crash, and while I seriously considered an enticing job offer in Shanghai, back in New York, Michael was playing dirty. Through his attorney, he formally contested the sale of our home, insisting on keeping the property and offering me a measly $20,000 buyout, a fraction of what I was legally entitled to. In his dreams, my lawyer, Chloe, scoffed, rolling her eyes at the absurdity of it. According to the latest professional appraisal, the Manhattan condo was valued at $1.5 million. After subtracting the remaining mortgage balance, there was roughly $900,000 in equity. Considering my significant initial down payment and the monthly installments I'd covered, I was entitled to at least $400,000. "I don't need his charity, Chloe," I said quietly, staring out the window at the city skyline. "I just want what's fair." The biggest shock came when my parents found out about the divorce. Instead of the typical stay and fix it lecture, they were nothing but supportive. My father even dug up the old bank wire transfer records from when we first bought the apartment. Victoria. His voice crackled over the phone, thick with emotion. There's something your mother and I never told you. That $150,000 we contributed toward the down payment? $100,000, that was your grandmother's inheritance money she'd been saving for your dowry. We were just terrified that if Michael's family knew it was your personal inheritance, they'd try to find a way to claim it, so we told everyone it was just our money. I felt the tears well up and spill over. To think my parents had been silently shielding me all those years, protecting my assets while I had been busy throwing my life away on a man who wasn't worth a single tear. A month later, the court set the first mediation date. Michael showed up with his entire family in tow, clearly trying to play the part of the grieving, abandoned husband for the judge. But the moment the judge reviewed the evidence from the unauthorized withdrawals Michael made to fund his family's petty vendettas against my career, to the text messages where he'd threatened to ruin me, the mood in the room shifted. My case was solid. The mediation failed, and the divorce moved straight to trial. Panic finally set in for Michael. Through his attorney, he started scrambling, offering a compromise. He'd agree to sell the house, but he wanted a 55-45 split in his favor. Chloe shook her head firmly. Victoria, based on the evidence we have, you have every right to demand an even 50-50 split. I looked at the settlement papers and let out a long, weary sigh. Keep the 5%, I said, exhausted. Consider it a severance fee for buying back my freedom. Finally, under the watchful eye of the court, we signed the divorce decree. The house was to be listed immediately, and the proceeds would be divided according to our agreement. Michael had 30 days to clear himself and his relatives out of the condo, so the realtors could begin staging it for showings. As I walked out of the courthouse, Michael blocked my path at the steps. He looked haggard, his suit rumpled, the weight of his own choices finally settling on his shoulders. Victoria, he rasped, his voice barely a whisper. Is there really no other way? Can we really not fix this? I looked at him, and for the first time in years, I felt absolutely nothing. No anger, no resentment, no hurt, just the calm, still surface of a lake. Michael, I truly hope you find happiness one day, but this marriage died a long time ago. He hung his head, muttering, if only I had stepped up for you sooner. Ifs and buts don't change the past, Michael, I said softly. Goodbye. As he turned and walked away, the afternoon sun hit the limestone steps of the courthouse, casting a golden light on the path ahead. I descended those stairs one step at a time, feeling the invisible weight that had been crushing my chest for years simply lift away. Waiting for me at the bottom were Sarah and Chloe. They offered me smiles that felt warmer than the summer sun. I knew from this moment on my life was turning a new page. There would be challenges ahead, sure, but for the first time in my life, every single step I took would be my own choice. A week after the papers were signed, my realtor called. Victoria, we have an offer. A buyer is willing to pay $1.45 million for the condo. What do you think? I did the mental math. After clearing the mortgage, we were looking at roughly $850,000 in net profit. Following our split, I was looking at a payout of nearly $380,000. It wasn't just money, it was the foundation for the rest of my life. I finally had the freedom to start over. A week after the divorce papers were finalized, I got a call from the real estate agent. Victoria, I have a potential buyer offering $150,000. What do you think? I did a quick mental calculation. After paying off the remaining mortgage and splitting the proceeds, my share would be roughly $60,000. It was a bit lower than the current market value in New York City, but given the circumstances, I was ready to walk away. That sounds fair, I said. When are you showing the house? The agent hesitated, his voice sounding uneasy. The buyers want to stop by tomorrow, but Michael said the house is a mess and he needs more time to clean up. I let out a cold, cynical laugh. I knew Michael's game, just another stall tactic. Tell the buyers to be there tomorrow at 2:00 p.m. I'll be there myself to handle it. I hung up and immediately dialed my attorney. If he continues to obstruct the sale, can I petition the court for an enforcement order? Absolutely, my lawyer replied firmly. You have every right to protect your asset. The next afternoon, I met the agent and the potential buyers at the doorstep right on time. I knocked, but there was no answer. I tried calling Michael, but his phone went straight to voicemail. They were clearly trying to ghost us. The agent looked embarrassed, shifting his weight awkwardly. I didn't waste my breath on anger. I simply pulled out my spare set of keys. Thank God I hadn't surrendered those yet. The moment we walked inside, the atmosphere shifted. The buyers, who had been eager just moments before, stopped dead in their tracks. The living room was a disaster zone. Cardboard boxes, discarded clothes, and toys were strewn everywhere. The dining table was covered in greasy, half-eaten takeout containers, and the bedroom was a pigsty with the closet doors hanging off their hinges. Even worse, the walls were covered in messy crayon scribbles, and in some places, the paint was peeling off in strips. The buyers exchanged a look of pure disgust. With the property in this condition? No thanks. We'll look at something else. They turned on their heels and walked out without another word. The agent sighed, rubbing his temples. Victoria, with the house in this state, it's going to be impossible to fetch a good price. I clenched my fists, my knuckles turning white. Give me 1 week to handle this. As soon as they left, I walked through every room, taking high-resolution photos of every scratch, stain, and piece of damaged drywall to send to my attorney. Then, I made a decisive move. I headed to the hardware store and bought 2 high-security deadbolt kits. It took me half an hour to swap out the locks on the front door and the interior rooms. Once finished, I taped a clear, professional notice to the front door. Michael, I have changed the locks. If you need to retrieve your personal items, you must contact me. The sale of this property is proceeding, and any further obstruction will be documented and reported to the court. I knew exactly what would happen next. Before I could even drive away, my phone started buzzing. Victoria, what the hell are you playing at? You actually dared to change the locks on my house. Michael's voice was shrill, practically screeching through the speaker. Per our divorce settlement, this house is on the market. I have every right to protect the state of the asset, I said, my voice steady and ice-cold. Your family have intentionally devalued this property. I have photographic evidence. This is our property, Michael, and the court has given you 30 days to vacate. That's final. He roared, no, this is my... No, I cut him off. It's a marital asset, and your time is up. He went silent for a few seconds, then his tone suddenly shifted, trying to sound soft and conciliatory. Victoria, can't we try again? Mom and Jason have moved out. It's just me here now. Why are we doing this? I let out a long, weary sigh. I've accepted a new position in Shanghai. I'm leaving next week. Shanghai? Michael exploded, his voice rising an octave. Why didn't anyone tell me? Are you really just going to leave like that? Because we're divorced, Michael. I replied sharply. I no longer owe you an explanation for my life plans. I hung up on him and stood in the middle of the house that once held all our dreams, looking at the crayon on the walls, the gashes in the flooring, and the thick, stubborn grease in the kitchen. I didn't feel sadness. I felt a sudden, profound sense of relief. Every blemish in this house was just proof that our marriage had been rotting from the inside out for years. I was finally free. I locked the door, handed the keys to the agent, and instructed them to hire a professional cleaning and painting crew to prep the house. As I returned to my temporary studio apartment, I took a deep breath of fresh air. I had finally crossed the finish line. I started packing my bags, ready to move on to my new chapter in Shanghai. That evening, Sarah dropped by to help me fold clothes and brought over dinner. So, she asked, neatly stacking a pile of sweaters into my suitcase, how are things over at the house? I couldn't shake the weight of everything that had happened, but I knew I had to move forward. I started packing my bags, preparing for my flight to Shanghai. That evening, Sarah stopped by to help me fold my clothes, bringing over some dinner. "So, how are things going with the house?" she asked, smoothing out a sweater. I filled her in on everything that happened today. Sarah was livid, practically stomping her feet. "Michael is such a coward, sabotaging the property and making it look like a dump just to tank the sale value. That's pathetic." I just shrugged. "It doesn't matter. My attorney told me that if Michael keeps obstructing the process, we can petition the court for a forced auction. He's only going to end up with even less money. He's just shooting himself in the foot." Sarah paused, then remembered something. "By the way, I heard Michael's career is spiraling. Apparently, he was just demoted." My hands froze for a split second as I folded a shirt. "Are you serious?" "Dead serious," Sarah said, making a face. "Word is, he's been having major behavioral issues, constantly fighting with clients. Total meltdown. Honestly, he deserves it." I stayed silent. Even though we were divorced, hearing that Michael had hit rock bottom stirred up a whirlwind of complex emotions. We had shared a life together after all. The next day, I received a call from Mrs. Sterling. We hadn't spoken since that grueling day in family court, and the silence had been heavy ever since. "Victoria?" Her voice sounded raspy, much older and more fragile than I remembered. "I know I'm to blame for so much of this. I spoiled Michael. And this is the monster I helped create." I listened quietly, not offering a word. "He's drinking every night, neglecting his work, everything," she continued, her voice trembling. "I told him to find someone else, but he just keeps talking about you. Victoria, can't you give him one more chance?" I gripped the phone, my voice steady. "What Michael needs isn't a second chance, Mrs. Sterling. What he needs is to grow up. Maybe this will finally teach him that marriage is a partnership between two adults, not a one-way street where one person demands everything and the other sacrifices their entire life." There was a long, heavy silence on the other end of the line. Finally, she let out a shaky sigh. "I wish you nothing but happiness, Victoria." The call ended, and I found myself tearing up. Despite all the years of manipulation and heartbreak, in that moment, I chose to remember the grace she was finally showing. A week later, the house was finally scrubbed clean and staged perfectly. A young couple offered $1.8 million for it. It was slightly below market value for a home in that neighborhood, but I didn't care. I just wanted this chapter closed for good. On the day of the closing, Michael showed up. He looked haggard and thin, but for once, he seemed sober. He was wearing an old suit, the same one he wore when we first met. "Is the job in Shanghai treating you well?" he asked after the papers were signed, his voice hesitant. "It's challenging," I replied, "but I love it." He nodded, cleared his throat, and looked down. "Victoria, I'm sorry. For everything." I had waited 5 years to hear those words, but when they finally came, I felt nothing but peace. The anger had evaporated. "Thank you," I said softly. "And I'm sorry too, if I ever hurt you along the way. I hope you find some peace, Michael." Stepping out of the real estate office, the New York sun was radiant, bathing the streets in a brilliant, golden light. I took a deep, steadying breath, finally feeling the weight of the last 5 years lifting off my shoulders. The house was sold. The divorce was finalized. A new career was waiting. My phone buzzed in my bag, a message from my team in Shanghai. "Victoria, your office is all set up. The whole team is looking forward to having you here." I smiled and typed back, "Thank you. See you all on Monday." I looked up at the clear blue sky, watching a flock of pigeons soar in a graceful, wide arc. Suddenly, I was transported back 5 years. I remembered Michael standing in the pouring rain, waiting for me outside my office, holding an umbrella, half of his body drenched, just to keep me dry. Back then, we thought love was enough to conquer anything. Now, I finally understood the truth. A real marriage doesn't just need love. It needs mutual respect, integrity, and absolute equality. And as I walked toward my future, I knew I was finally free. This marriage taught me the bitter taste of suffering, but it also forced me to grow. Now the time had finally come for me to spread my wings and claim the sky that was truly mine. My flight to Shanghai was scheduled for the early morning. I stood at the security checkpoint, gripping the handles of two massive suitcases, a backpack overflowing with design portfolios slung over my shoulder. I turned back for one last look. This city, New York, held so much history. The joys and the tears, the love and the betrayal, the painful lessons and the inevitable losses. Ling held me in a tight embrace, her eyes rimmed with red. "Stay in touch, okay? Promise you'll come back to visit," she whispered, her voice trembling. I squeezed her hand, grateful for her friendship, and stepped through the security gates. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A message from an unknown number. "Safe travels, Victoria. Michael." I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. Some memories are better left gathering dust in a forgotten corner of your life. That's just how it goes. Life in Shanghai was fast-paced and incredibly fulfilling. As the head of design for the East China region, I led a specialized team handling the company's most ambitious projects. The pressure was immense, but the talent and dedication of my team helped me find my footing in this new role almost instantly. The company set me up in an apartment in Pudong, a cozy one-bedroom with a living area that wasn't exactly opulent, but felt like a true sanctuary. I grew particularly fond of the small balcony, where on slow weekend mornings I could sip my coffee and watch the city wake up beneath me. A month later, the settlement from the sale of our house in New York hit my account a cool $180,000. I tucked $150,000 into a long-term high-yield savings account, funneled $20,000 into an investment portfolio, and kept the rest for my daily expenses. For the first time in my life, I had absolute, uncompromising control over my own finances. No one to answer to, no one to demand an explanation. 3 months into my new life, I was deep into a design review on a Saturday afternoon when my phone rang. My heart skipped a beat when I saw the name on the screen, Michael. I hesitated, staring at the phone for a long moment before finally answering. "Hello?" "Victoria." Michael's voice was raspy, heavy with exhaustion. "How have you been?" "I'm doing great," I replied, my voice steady and composed. "Is there something you need?" He was silent for a few seconds. "My mother passed away last week." I felt a jolt go through me, and I stood up abruptly. "What? How? When did this happen?" "Her heart. It gave out suddenly," he choked out. "Even toward the end, she kept mentioning your name. She wanted to apologize for everything." A sharp, stinging pain settled in my chest. Despite all the friction and the bitter arguments we'd had, hearing the news left me heavy with sorrow. At the end of the day, she had once been someone I called Mom. "I'm so sorry for your loss, Michael," I said softly. "She was a good mother to you." He broke down on the other end. "Victoria, I was wrong about everything. Without you, everything has just fallen apart." I didn't respond. In that moment, no words felt right. I didn't want to offer hollow comfort, nor did I want to be cruel and dwell on past grievances. "I heard you're doing incredible work in Shanghai," he finally said, his voice quiet. "Congratulations." "Thank you," I replied, keeping it short. Another long, heavy silence stretched between us. Finally, he let out a jagged sigh. "I won't keep you any longer. Take care of yourself." After the call ended, I walked to the window, watching the lights of the Huangpu River shimmering in the night. Life is so fragile, and all the grudges, the petty insults, and even the deepest loves seem to shrink into nothingness in the face of death. Her passing felt like the final period at the end of a long, exhausting chapter between Michael and me. Time slipped away quietly. Before I knew it, I had been working in Shanghai for a full year. At the year-end gala, I was honored as the Manager of the Year, and my team's project won a prestigious award within the industry. As I stood on that stage to accept the trophy, I looked out at the audience and thanked everyone who had walked this path, with me including the architect of my failed marriage, because if that marriage hadn't crumbled, I never would have learned how to build something so much stronger on my own. To realize how I truly wanted to live my life. As the ceremony wrapped up, the CEO pulled me aside. "Victoria, the board is considering sending you to our headquarters in the United States for a 6-month intensive executive program. We're grooming you for the VP position. Your performance this year has been nothing short of stellar." He beamed at me, adding, "Even our international partners were blown away by your presentation." I gave a respectful nod, my heart swelling with genuine gratitude. Just a year ago, I was a woman suffocating in a stagnant, soul-crushing marriage. Now I was finally living on my own terms, shining bright because of my own merit. Just then, my eyes caught a familiar silhouette standing in the lobby. He looked gaunt, dressed in a simple white button-down and jeans, clutching a bouquet of lilies. "What are you doing here?" I asked, completely taken aback. "I was on a business trip in Shanghai," Michael said, his hand trembling slightly as he reached out to offer the flowers. "I heard you were being honored today. I wanted to congratulate you." I took the bouquet, feeling a strange, awkward tension hanging in the air. "Thank you. Would you like to come up to my office?" Inside, Michael slowly scanned the room, his gaze lingering on the display shelf where the awards from the International Design Association stood. "You really did it, Victoria," he murmured, almost to himself. "Are you happier now? Without me?" I didn't deny it. People only truly blossom when they are in the environment that nurtures them. Michael nodded slowly, then reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a thick envelope. "This is from my mother," he said. "She made me promise to hand-deliver this to you, no matter what." I opened the envelope. Inside was a handwritten note and a bank statement. The letter was brief. "Victoria, I am so sorry. This is $200,000, the savings of my entire life. I hope this covers the money Michael selfishly took from you without your knowledge. I just want you to be happy. I will always love you." Tears welled up in my eyes, blurring the words on the page. Mrs. Sterling, that cold, demanding woman who had made my life a living hell, had finally chosen this way to offer her apology. "I can't take this," I said, pushing the bank document back toward him. "Keep it," Michael said, his voice unusually soft. "It was my mother's final wish, and it's the only way I can start to make amends for my own failures." We sat and talked for a long time. Michael opened up, admitting that after Mrs. Sterling passed away, he had spiraled into a deep depression. It forced him to reevaluate his entire life. He had quit his high-pressure corporate job and now worked as a junior associate at a smaller firm. The pay was modest, but the toll on his mental health was much lower. "I've been seeing a therapist," Michael confessed. "He told me that being coddled as a child blinded me. I never learned how to respect a partner. I'm trying to fix that now." I offered a small, sincere smile. I was genuinely happy for him. Recognizing one's flaws is always the first step toward real change. Before he left, Michael lingered by the door for a long time. Finally, he looked at me and asked, "Victoria, is there any chance for us to start over?" I looked deep into his eyes and shook my head, gently but firmly. "Some paths, once walked, cannot be retraced, but I truly hope you find your own happiness." He nodded, his eyes glassy, though a sad smile touched his lips. "I hope you do too. Take care of yourself, Victoria." As the door clicked shut, I carefully placed Mrs. Sterling's letter in my drawer. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the skyline of New York City glittered like a sea of stars. My heart felt an incredible sense of peace. The past was just a memory and the future was overflowing with endless possibilities. This was life in its most beautiful, authentic form. And now, months later, as I settle into this new chapter, the autumn in Boston is breathtaking. The maple leaves along the Charles River are turning a vibrant, fiery red. Walking through the Harvard campus, surrounded by students clutching their books under the golden afternoon sun, I finally feel like I'm exactly where I'm meant to be. I spent 4 months in Boston, immersed in an executive leadership program my firm had sponsored. On weekends, I loved jogging along the Charles River, breathing in the crisp air of a country so different from home. When the fatigue finally set in, I'd collapse onto a park bench, watching the world go by, reflecting on the sharp turns my life had taken. 2 years ago, I was a woman suffocating in a dead-end marriage, trapped in a cycle of resentment. Today, I was standing on the global stage, finally chasing my own dreams. During the final week of the program, I received an email from Sarah. "Have you heard?" she wrote. "Michael got remarried. I heard his new wife is a colleague, someone with a real fire in her, you know? She keeps him on a tight leash. Truly, a match made in heaven if you believe in karma." I couldn't help but chuckle as I shook my head. Time really is the ultimate healer. Those wounds that once felt like they would tear me apart were now just fading scars I could talk about with a quiet, detached smile. Upon returning to my new life, I officially stepped into my role as the Vice President of Design for the Asia-Pacific region. My office is located on the top floor of a sleek skyscraper in the heart of the Lujia Financial District. Through the floor-to-ceiling glass walls, the sprawling skyline of the city stretches out like a neon-lit map. Whenever I work late, I stand there, staring at the endless constellations of city lights, silently contemplating the transience of life and the beauty of finding peace. One ordinary afternoon, the receptionist buzzed me. "Victoria, there's a visitor here to see you." I walked into the conference room, only to be stopped in my tracks. Michael was standing there. He looked healthier than I remembered, dressed in a sharp, tailored suit, holding an elegant gift box. He smiled awkwardly. "I was passing through on a business trip, and I heard about your promotion. I wanted to come by and congratulate you." "Let's grab a coffee at the cafe downstairs," I said, my voice steady. Over espresso, Michael opened up. He told me his new wife was strong-willed but incredibly grounded. They had clear boundaries, no professional interference, total financial independence, and crucially, their parents weren't allowed to just move in whenever they felt like it. "Sounds familiar, doesn't it?" he said, letting out a self-deprecating laugh. "It took me a long time, but I finally realized that everything you were asking for back then, it was all entirely reasonable." I gave him a faint, polite smile. It was true. It was just a shame he had to lose everything and everyone to finally grow up. Michael slid the box across the table. "A late wedding gift," he said softly. I opened it to find a limited edition collection of architectural manuscripts I had obsessed over for years, but could never justify buying. It was incredibly rare. "Consider it an apology," he whispered, "and a way to wish you well." He looked at me with a sincerity that caught me off guard. "Thank you for being strong enough to walk away, Victoria. If you hadn't, I would have never learned how to be a man." When Michael left, the sunset had drenched the streets in a deep, melancholic gold. Our shadow stretched long across the pavement. He paused for a moment and held out his hand. "Take care, Victoria." I shook his hand, my grip firm and calm. "You too, Michael. I hope you find the happiness you're looking for." As I watched his silhouette fade into the city crowd, a sudden, fleeting memory of a rainy afternoon back in the past washed over me, the image of him standing under an umbrella, waiting for me in the cold. If only life could stay as perfect as that first encounter, why does it have to feel like a tragedy written in ink? Some stories, I realized, are simply born to become memories, and some forms of growth can only be forged through the fires of heartbreak. I walked back to my office, where my assistant was waiting. "We have a high-stakes dinner meeting tonight," she reminded me. I headed to the lounge, slipped into an elegant evening gown, and checked my reflection. The woman in the mirror had eyes that shone with clarity and a mouth curved into a serene, unshakable smile. I was finally the person I was meant to be, a woman who had walked through the storm and emerged, stronger than ever, on the other side. That evening, I navigated the room with ease, switching effortlessly between languages as I spoke with international clients. I shared my insights on the latest industry trends, commanding the room with the kind of poise that only comes from someone who has weathered the storm. Nobody in that ballroom had any idea that the successful woman standing before them had once been a girl completely lost in the trap of a suffocating marriage. As the gala wound down, the city lights of New York shimmered against the night sky. When I finally reached my apartment, I kicked off my designer heels, the relief washing over me instantly. I poured a glass of deep red wine and stepped out onto the balcony, letting the cool Manhattan breeze brush away the lingering fatigue of the day. Suddenly, my phone buzzed. It was an email notification from the International Design Association. My pulse quickened as I read the words, "Victoria, you have been nominated for Designer of the Year. We cordially invite you to Paris next month to receive your award." I took a slow sip of my wine, gazing up at the starlit sky. Life is truly ironic. The moment you find the courage to shed the weight of your past, the universe starts rewarding you in ways you never thought possible. Tomorrow, a brand new chapter begins. And for the first time, I know that every choice I make is coming from my own heart. Every path I walk now leads to one place: absolute freedom. Looking back, the memories don't sting like they used to. I can still recall the look in Michael's eyes when he criticized my every move. I remember the sharp, biting tone of Mrs. Sterling whenever she felt I wasn't catering to her expectations fast enough. I can still hear the chaotic noise of that house, the constant, frantic demands that left me feeling like a stranger in my own home. That house, which I once thought was my dream, is now nothing more than a graveyard of old wounds. But the anger is gone. It's been replaced by the quiet, steady calm of someone who has climbed out of the abyss. I finally understand that my blind compliance never earned me respect. It only emboldened them to keep crossing my boundaries. The most heartbreaking part wasn't losing the marriage, it was losing myself. I lost my confidence, I lost my voice, and I surrendered the right to make my own choices. Today, as the morning light flooded through the windows of the apartment I now call my own, I realized I am truly, finally free. Free to start over, free to rediscover who I am, and free to believe that there are infinite, beautiful possibilities waiting for me just over the horizon. Closing the door on that old life for good, I walk forward with a clear head and a peaceful heart. That 5-year journey of love and marriage has finally closed, leaving me to find my own strength and shine on my own terms. Marriage, as I've learned, requires much more than just love. It demands mutual respect and true equality. Blindly sacrificing yourself will never earn you the appreciation you deserve. Instead, it only invites others to take advantage of you. I truly hope that every woman listening to this understands that while wounds may hurt, they also force us to grow. Only when we learn to love and respect ourselves can we truly find the peace we deserve. Thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my story. If you found a piece of yourself in this journey, or took away a lesson that resonated with you, please hit that subscribe button, give this video a like, and share it with someone who might need to hear it. It helps us keep sharing these stories with you. From all of us, I wish you and your loved ones nothing but peace, happiness, and the courage to choose yourselves. 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 Choose yourselves.